She was 8 years old, standing in a school cafeteria line with a brown paper bag clutched so tightly in her small hands that it had started to tear at the edges. Her eyes were fixed on the floor. She didn't want anyone to look at her, because if they looked too closely, they might see that her bag was almost empty. Just 2 crackers and a folded napkin. That was it. And when a tall man in a gray suit accidentally bumped into her and reached down to help pick up her fallen lunch bag, she grabbed his wrist and whispered 4 words that would follow him for the rest of his life. "Don't throw away my lunch." What happened after that whisper didn't just change her day. It changed the direction of a multi-million-dollar company, and it changed the heart of the man who ran it. Before we get into this story, if you believe that small acts of kindness can create ripples that travel further than we ever imagined, take a second to hit that subscribe button, give this video a like, and drop a comment below telling us about a time someone showed you unexpected kindness. This channel is called Kindness Hub, and every single week we bring you real, heartfelt stories about ordinary people doing extraordinary things for one another. Trust me, you're going to want to stay for this one all the way to the end. Now, let's go back to that Tuesday afternoon in a modest elementary school just outside Columbus, Ohio. His name was Richard Hale, and at 52 years old, he was the CEO of a mid-sized food distribution company called Harvest Grove Foods. Richard wasn't the kind of executive who spent his afternoons wandering through elementary school cafeterias. He was a numbers man. Spreadsheets, quarterly earnings, supply chain logistics, board meetings that ran 3 hours too long. That was his world. But that particular Tuesday, his world intersected with a little girl's world in a way neither of them expected. Richard was at the school because his daughter's education foundation was hosting a small event, a partnership between his company and local schools to donate surplus food to families in need. It was mostly a photo opportunity, if he was being honest with himself. Smile for the cameras, shake a few hands, cut a ribbon, and get back to the office before his 4 o'clock call. He had done a dozen events just like it. He expected this one to be no different. He was walking through the cafeteria, half listening to the school principal describe the new lunch program, when he nearly collided with a small girl carrying a lunch bag that looked like it had been reused so many times the paper had gone soft and gray. The bag slipped from her hands and hit the floor. Richard, out of pure reflex, bent down to pick it up for her. That's when she grabbed his wrist. Her grip was surprisingly strong for such a small child, and she looked up at him with eyes that seemed far too serious for an 8-year-old, and she whispered, almost pleading, "Don't throw away my lunch." Richard froze. He hadn't been about to throw anything away. He was simply picking it up, but something in the way she said it, the desperation behind those 5 words, told him this wasn't really about the bag at all. "I wasn't going to throw it away, sweetheart," he said gently, kneeling down so he was at her eye level. "I was just picking it up for you. What's your name?" "Maya," she said quietly, still eyeing the bag like it was the most precious thing in the world. "That's a beautiful name. Is everything okay, Maya?" She nodded quickly, too quickly, the way children do when they've learned to hide things that hurt. She took her bag back gently, hugged it to her chest, and hurried off to find a seat at the far end of a lunch table, away from the other kids. Richard should have moved on. The principal was waiting. The photographer was setting up. His 4 o'clock call was still on his calendar. But something about that little girl's face stayed with him. He excused himself for a moment and found a quiet corner where he could watch her without being obvious about it. What he saw broke his heart. Maya sat alone at the end of the table. She unfolded the top of her bag slowly, almost ceremonially, and pulled out 2 saltine crackers and a small folded paper napkin. That was her lunch. Not a sandwich, not fruit, not even a juice box. 2 crackers and a napkin, and she ate them slowly, one small bite at a time, trying to make them last as long as possible, while the other children around her unpacked sandwiches, chips, and cookies. Richard felt something shift inside his chest. He had built a company that moved literally millions of pounds of food across the country every single year. Trucks full of grain, produce, canned goods, and packaged meals rolled out of his distribution centers daily, headed to grocery stores in 42 states. And yet here, in a school less than 20 minutes from his own headquarters, an 8-year-old girl was rationing crackers like they were gold. He didn't approach her again that day. He didn't want to embarrass her in front of her classmates. But before he left the school, He found a quiet moment with the school counselor, a warm, tired-looking woman named Ms. Delgado who had clearly seen more heartbreak in that building than any one person should have to carry. "Tell me about Maya," Richard said, the little girl at the end of the third table. "Pound bay lunch." Ms. Delgado's expression softened immediately, the way it does when someone finally asks about a child you've been quietly worrying about for months. "Maya Therese," she said. "Her mother works 2 jobs, a daytime shift at a laundromat and nights cleaning offices downtown. Her father isn't in the picture. They live with Maya's grandmother in a small apartment. Money is tight most months, but this month has been especially hard. Her mother lost some hours at the laundromat, and I think things at home have gotten worse than she's letting on. Maya qualifies for free lunch through the school program, actually, but she's proud. Some days she says she already ate, so the other kids won't be able to say she's poor. Other days, she just brings whatever she can find at home, so she doesn't have to explain why her tray is empty at the free lunch line." Richard felt a lump rise in his throat. Why did she grab my wrist like that? Why did she say don't throw away her lunch? Ms. Delgado sighed. "Last month, a boy accidentally knocked her bag off the table, and it spilled, and everyone saw that there was almost nothing inside. He didn't mean any harm. Kids can be careless." But another child laughed, and Maya was humiliated. Since then, she holds onto that bag like her life depends on it. I think she's terrified of that moment happening again, of anyone else seeing how little she has. Richard didn't say much after that. He thanked Ms. Delgado, shook a few more hands for the cameras, and drove back to his office in complete silence. No radio, no phone calls, just the image of Maya slowly eating 2 crackers alone at the end of a lunch table, playing over and over in his mind. That night, Richard couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about the supply chain reports on his desk, the ones that talked about surplus inventory and distribution efficiency and waste reduction targets. Somewhere in his company's own warehouses, there was more food sitting on shelves than that little girl would eat in a month. And somehow, none of it was reaching her. The next morning, Richard walked into his office and canceled every meeting on his calendar. His assistant thought something was terribly wrong. In a way, something was. He called in his head of logistics, his head of community relations, and the head of his company's charitable foundation, and he told them about Maya. He didn't just describe her briefly. He told them everything: the 2 crackers, the folded napkin, the way she guarded that bag like it held something precious instead of something painfully small. "I want to know how many kids like Maya are sitting in cafeterias within 50 miles of every single one of our distribution centers," Richard said. "I want real numbers, not estimates. And then I want a plan." Some of his executives were hesitant at first. Corporate donation programs were slow, layered with logistics, insurance concerns, liability questions. One board member gently reminded him that Harvest Grove Foods already gave to several established charities and met its philanthropic goals for the year. Richard listened, nodded, and then said something that would later be repeated in company meetings for years to come. Meeting a goal on a spreadsheet doesn't mean anything if there's a little girl 20 minutes from here rationing crackers because she's afraid of being embarrassed at lunch. We're not talking about a donation target today. We're talking about Maya. Within 3 weeks, something remarkable had taken shape. Richard didn't just write a check and move on, the way corporations sometimes do when guilt needs a quick and easy exit. He built something lasting. Harvest Grove Foods partnered directly with Maya's school district to create a discreet, dignity-first meal program. No child would ever again have to hold an empty bag while everyone around them could see. But Richard didn't stop there. He personally visited every school in the partnership over the following months, and every time, he made a point of quietly checking in with the counselors, learning names, learning stories, making sure the program was actually working the way it was meant to, not just looking good in a press release. He also made a decision that surprised even his closest colleagues. He asked Ms. Delgado if he could meet Maya's mother, not as the CEO of a company looking for a good story, but simply as a man who wanted to understand what a family truly needed. Maya's mother, a soft-spoken woman named Carla, was initially embarrassed and hesitant, worried that accepting help meant admitting failure. Richard sat with her for over an hour in the small school counseling office. and he told her something he meant with his whole heart. "You're not failing anyone, Carla. You're working 2 jobs to keep a roof over your daughter's head. That's not failure. That's love in its hardest form. Let us help carry some of the weight. That's all this is." Through the foundation, Carla was connected with a job training program that eventually helped her secure a more stable, better-paying position. 1 job instead of 2, with hours that actually let her be home in the evenings with Maya and her grandmother. It wasn't charity in the way people often imagine, handouts with no follow-through. It was a genuine investment in giving a family the tools to stand steady on their own feet again. Maya changed too, slowly, the way children do when they finally feel safe. Ms. Delgado said that within a few months, Maya started sitting in the middle of the lunch table instead of the far end. She started laughing with her classmates. She stopped hiding her lunch bag because she no longer needed to hide anything at all. And on the days when Richard visited the school, which became a fairly regular occurrence, Maya would run up to him, not because he was some important businessman in a suit, but because he was the man who had knelt down to her level in a noisy cafeteria and actually listened. One afternoon, almost a year after that first encounter, Richard visited the school again. Maya, now taller, more confident, with a bright yellow backpack and a wide, easy smile, ran up to him in the hallway and handed him a folded piece of paper. He opened it later that day in his office. It was a drawing, crayon, and colored pencil of a lunch table full of kids, all smiling, all eating together. At the top, in careful handwritten letters, it said, "Thank you for not throwing away my lunch. You saved it. You saved me too." Richard kept that drawing framed on his office wall from that day forward, right beside his company's mission statement, which he had personally rewritten that year. It used to say something about market leadership and operational excellence. Now it simply read, "No child should ever have to whisper for help. We should already be listening." What started as a brief, almost accidental moment in a school cafeteria eventually grew into a program that reached over 300 schools across the state, feeding tens of thousands of children with dignity instead of shame. But if you ask Richard today what he's most proud of, he won't talk about the numbers, the schools, or the press coverage. He'll talk about a little girl gripping his wrist and whispering 4 words that reminded him what truly mattered. Kindness rarely announces itself with fireworks or fanfare. Sometimes it arrives as a whisper, easy to miss if we're moving too fast, too focused on our own schedules and our own noise to notice the quiet pain sitting right in front of us. Richard could have walked past Maya that day. He could have picked up her bag, smiled politely, and continued on to his 4 o'clock call, and no one would have ever known the difference. But he stopped. He knelt down. He listened. And in doing so, he didn't just change one little girl's life. He changed the lives of thousands of children who will never even know his name. And he changed his own heart in the process. We don't need a company or a title or a fortune to make that kind of difference. We simply need to pay attention to the people around us, to notice the quiet signs that someone is struggling, and to be willing to kneel down in whatever way that looks like in our own lives and truly listen. So today, wherever you are, whoever you're sitting next to, whoever crosses your path, take a moment to truly look. You never know whose whisper you might be the one to finally hear. And you never know just how far that single moment of kindness might travel, rippling outward into places you will never even witness, changing lives you may never even know you touched. If this story moved you even a little, please share it with someone who needs a reminder that kindness still matters in this world. Subscribe to Kindness Hub for more stories just like this one. And leave a comment below telling us who in your life has shown you unexpected kindness. Until next time, keep listening for the whispers and keep choosing to be kind.